Hey guys, what's going on? It's Eli, back with another review video, and welcome to Robert Zemeckis Movie Week. Yes, Robert Zemeckis Movie Week. All throughout this week, I will be reviewing 4 movies of Zemeckis's, and yeah, they're pretty good ones. Of course, I mean, have to review some of his, best well-known masterpieces, so yeah. So, that's right. The first one I'm reviewing, and yep, that's right, you read the title, you know exactly what the first movie of Robert Zemeckis's that I'm reviewing, that being none other from 1994, Forrest Gump. Yes, Forrest Gump. Just, what a masterpiece of a movie this is. Seriously, I mean, even rewatching it, me rewatching it, that is, yeah, it's still amazing from beginning to end. Very tear-jerking, and with its story, and the fact that this movie was based off of a novel, and, not to mention, and I'm technically getting into a little bit of background, if any of you know about the novel, well, because the novel, being very different from the movie, and not to mention that it took literally 9 years for this movie to be made, and even when, say, there was something else that came out that was quite similar to Forrest Gump, it came out before Forrest Gump, so yeah, but thankfully, this movie did come out eventually. It was made, and when it was released in 1994, under the direction of Zemeckis himself, and the title character being played by none other than Tom Hanks. Holy crap, what this movie had to offer, and what would happen to it next, most notably at the Oscars, where it would win Best Picture, and rightfully so. Tom Hanks would win his second Oscar for Best Actor in a Leading Role. The previous year, before Forrest Gump, he won for another biggie for Hanks and another tear-jerking movie, Philadelphia. If you know, you know. Yeah. So nice to see that, Tom, he won 2 Oscars in a row, yeah, just, I've seen Forrest Gump before a good chunk of times, and, again, rewatching this, I think it still holds up. Say what you will, I'm sure that, yeah, as I recall, I know 1 or 2 people, how they feel about this movie, and some stuff being outdated, but come on, like, this is history, even what my mom had to say about it, because we had a conversation about Forrest Gump and, even like when Philadelphia was brought up too, history and stuff like that in this movie. You get what I'm saying? Just, yeah. But yeah, just overall, 1994's Forrest Gump. It's a masterpiece. And if not, one of Zemeckis' top masterpieces of any movie he's directed. Well, this not being the only one, of course. He's directed more masterpiece movies than just this one. I mean, I can think of, say, Back to the Future, most notably the first one, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Castaway, need I go on? Just, yeah. Alright, but yeah, overall, I really enjoy Forrest Gump. It's amazing, still, it holds up, just, yeah, what more do I have to say? Okay, so, as always, for me, read the description / the story. Slow-witted Forrest Gump has never thought of himself as a disadvantaged, and thanks to his supportive mother, he leads anything but a restricted life. Whether dominating on the gridiron, I think, yeah, I'm saying it right, as a college football star, fighting in Vietnam, or captaining a shrimp boat, Forrest inspires people with his childlike optimism. But one person Forrest cares about most may be the most difficult to save, his childhood love, the sweet but troubled Jenny. Okay, so with that out of the way, getting into the film itself, because yeah, the timeline and, you know, the direction that this movie takes, you know, really interesting, definitely. And also to mention the man who is responsible for bringing this movie to life with his novel, the late Winston Groom. Yeah, so again, if any of you have read the novel, then surely you would know the huge difference between the original novel and the movie itself. Okay, so yeah. Anyways, so, opening in Savannah, yeah, where we see a beautiful white feather floating, and it lands straight where someone sitting on a bench, you know, at the bus stop, which being Forrest Gump himself, Tom Hanks. He picks up the feather, opens his case, and puts it in a book and such. And yeah, he's waiting for a bus, but we don't know what he's doing yet, and, you know, with him waiting at the bus stop. And anytime someone sits on the bench right next to him, well, starting with a nurse at the park bench, being played by Rebecca Williams, Forrest just talks and interacts with this nurse, offering her a chocolate, and even pointing out to the nurse that one of the famous quotes, there's a lot of great quotes and lines from this movie, without a doubt. One of them that Forrest Gump says to the nurse when offering a chocolate, "My mama always says life's a box of chocolates. You never know what you're gonna get." Because I like how he eats it. Yeah, I had to do that impression, so by eating it. And Gump complimenting on the nurse's shoes, those nice shoes. And even when we saw the shoes that he's wearing, a bit worn out and such, don't you think? But something very important about those shoes, and very later on in the movie, and I say very later on, but anyways, so Gump starts to go into this story, his backstory, his life, when he was a boy and from there on, and when he got magic shoes and so on, because yeah, starting off with, you know, his childhood, and a younger version of Forrest being credited as young Forrest, being played by a young Michael Connor Humphreys. And fun fact, when it came to, you know, when both Tom Hanks and young Michael Connor Humphreys, when both of them were cast as Forrest, according to Tom Hanks, he stated that Zemeckis came in and said that we've got a problem and, you know, someone needs to teach that kid how to talk or something. And Tom Hanks decided that maybe he should sound and speak exactly like how young Michael Connor Humphreys does, like this, you know? And even when Michael Connor got older, he didn't speak like that anymore, but at that time he did. And Tom Hanks thought that maybe he should speak with that kind of voice that young Michael Connor has. And you know what? That was pretty good. Look at the accent and with the performance that Tom Hanks brought to older Forrest Gump. Yeah. And not to mention that Tom Hanks, he did audition for this movie. He wasn't one of the first choices for the titled character, but when he auditioned, that's when they got him for the role. Just, yeah, I think right there and then. Actually, yeah, because you can watch those audition tapes. I'm pretty sure, yeah, they'd be featured on the bonus features of the DVD, as well as finding them on YouTube. But anyways, so young Forrest Gump, at a young age, he got braces, not in his teeth, but his legs. Like, seriously, like, why braces for legs? That just, I don't know. There's reasonings, but yeah. But also, we also get the introduction of Forrest's mother being played by good old Sally Field, Mrs. Gump. Well, Forrest even mentions that how he got his name, Forrest Gump. He was named after somebody by the name of Nathan Bedford Forrest. And he's an ancestor. He is an ancestor of Forrest Gump's, that is. And he was a Civil War general and the first Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. I think you know what that is, yeah. So, And how Forrest describes that, you know, like, you know, the general and a bunch of others dressed as ghosts, like, that's one way to describe, but anyways. And to speed things up because, well, there's at one point where Mrs. Gump, she tries to get her son into school, but the principal, which, yeah, that's how he's credited, the principal, being played by Sam Anderson, he tells Mrs. Gump that, you know, that there's probably a good chance that Forrest will not be accepted in this school. Because, and even showing, like, you know, a chart or something, you know, because Forrest is down here, like, not being that smart. And yeah, that whole thing in the movie sometimes, where sometimes people point out that, you know, he's stupid and not smart and such, but, you know, but it's not like, you know, Forrest is intentionally stupid or anything like that. You know what I mean? And, well, Mrs. Gump determined, you know, no matter what it takes to get her son into school and doing anything for her son. I mean, that's a good mother of her, you know, of her. But, well, this leads to when the principal asks Mrs. Gump, is there a Mr. Gump? And according to her, he had gone on vacation and never came back. And it leads straight to them getting physical back at the Gump house, you know, that whole thing that the principal does. And young Forrest can hear this. He's on a swing, you know, that's tied to a tree. And when the principal is about to leave the house and interacting a little with Forrest, like, I guess you could say mocking him and, you know, imitating what he heard from the principal. Just, yeah, he got him there. And Forrest he can even hear outside of the principal's office the conversation that they were having. And he even asks his mama, what is a vacation? And this vacation specifically, and yeah, her telling Forrest that, you know, vacation is when you go somewhere and you never come back. How she says it and describes it because of what happened to Mr. Gump, Forrest's father. And it's left for us to assume that, yeah, more than likely, Forrest's biological father pretty much abandoned him and his wife, pretty much. Yeah, that kind of father. But besides from that, life for young Forrest and his mama was pretty good. Sometimes they would have visitors coming to their house, and, well, their house was quite a big, nice, beautiful house. And, yeah, folks would come from near and far, and they would visit their house. And one of the guests that they had one evening, well, that was someone who was playing a little guitar, and Forrest was dancing to it with a broomstick. And that happens to be a young Elvis Presley. Yeah, Elvis Presley encountered young Forrest and, you know, was one of the guests that came to the Gump's house. And young Elvis Presley, being played by Peter Dobson, we don't see a young Elvis's face, but because his face is a little blurred, well, we can tell that, well, Peter Dobson is pulling off a good impression of, you know, Elvis. But he is dubbed, and he's uncredited. The dubbed voice for young Elvis and Forrest Gump was Kurt Russell. Yeah. And not to mention, Kurt Russell had portrayed Elvis Presley in that biopic that came out in the late 1970s, that one. And not to mention, Kurt Russell interacted and was on screen with the Elvis. He got to kick Elvis in the shin. If you know, you know. And Elvis, you know, assuring to Mrs. Gump that, you know, everything's good, and just, you know, he wanted to see, you know, what he does playing the guitar and such, and Elvis asked Forrest to do that crazy little move that he did, you know, and apparently Forrest inspired Elvis to do that kind of dance move, and a little later, when just so happens that young Forrest and Mrs. Gump, they were I guess getting some sweet desserts or something in boxes, and they just happened to see Elvis on TV and doing that crazy walk/dance move that young Forrest did. And yeah, at that time when people were complaining about Elvis and his specific dance moves, oh, brother, if you know about that, you know, just, yeah. And the way Elvis, like, keep in mind, because from Elvis to John Lennon, to any of the presidents of the United States that he encountered and met with, and when he would say, and as he's telling his story, that, you know, sadly, some of them would tragically die and so on, and, you know, mentioning about Elvis that, you know, he died, you know, he had some heart attack or something, yeah, with what Forrest knows. And when it comes to young Forrest going to school for the first time, well, kind of a bad start, because, well, already, the students on the school bus, they treat him like crap, and do not let him sit in any seat on the school bus. Golly, because it's like, they just already judge young Forrest, like, unless they're aware, because I know that at a certain point, the whole town, well, where Forrest and his mama lives, Greenbow, Alabama. Yeah, I think I might have pronounced that right. Greenbow, just, again, you know me sometimes. They later on know who Forrest is, and not that smart of a person. But, yeah, and also, the school bus driver, who was nice towards Forrest, young Forrest, and being credited as a school bus driver. Siobhan Fallon Hogan, I think I'm saying her last name right. I know her. She's a really good actress. I remember her best being in the Fred movies. Playing Fred's mother, you know. However, there is one student who lets Forrest sit right next to her. And according to Forrest, it was the most beautiful voice he ever heard. Young Jenny. Yes. This is where we get the introduction of whom would become Forrest's childhood love, Jenny Crane. And young Jenny being played by, well, yeah, because, you know, as always, I have IMDb up, and like, I hate when they're just randomly credited, you know, like on IMDb pages. Yeah, here she is. Young Jenny Crane being played by young Hannah Hall. Yeah, I think, yeah, a lot of people would know her best for being in, say, Rob Zombie's Halloween film, but more than that, I've seen her in a couple of other films. But, yeah, and some of the others, school students, and most of them being credited as school bus boy and girl, they were, one of Robert Zemeckis' kids was one of the school bus kids. Alexander Zemeckis, one of Tom Hanks's children, his daughter, Elizabeth Hanks, was one of them. There was also Ben Waddle, Logan Livingston Gomez. Yeah, so from there on, Jenny and Forrest, a friendship would grow, and, you know, according to Forrest, Jenny being the only friend that he has. And even Forrest saying that, you know, from time to time, when they would get together, and things that they would teach one another, like climbing a tree and reading, and even when, say, they would, you know, stay at this specific tree that they would go to and watch the stars. And Forrest saying that he and Jenny were like peas and carrots. Well, even when Forrest, he at one point gets chased by these young bullies on their bikes. They're throwing rocks at him. One did hit him hard and, you know, started bleeding on his forehead, but he didn't seem to let that bother him, because then Jenny encouraging Forrest to run, and another famous line / quote, "Run, Forrest, run!" And right there, when he starts to run away from those bullies, well, that's when the braces on his legs, they start to break off, and thus, yeah, how fast he runs. It's awesome. And also, some of the Alabama folks, like, especially, like, those elderly gentlemen, we would see them a couple of times, and them noticing Forrest and the comments that they would make. Yeah, they were pretty funny. And, yeah, so, you know, again, you know, the friendship between Forrest and Jenny, really good. Even when, say, Forrest, you know, at one point, meeting with Jenny at her home because she wasn't at school. She stayed home, and not going to school. And, well, unfortunately, and what we learned from Forrest, more about Jenny, she sadly lost her mother at a young age, and, she had been living with her father, but apparently, at a certain point, Jenny's father started to become you know, a big drinker and very aggressive and abusive. Jeez. And Jenny and Forrest, them running into a cornfield, and yeah, Jenny's father being a farmer and such, and Jenny's father being played by Kevin Magnan. And Jenny has Forrest get down on his knees and asking him to pray with her. You know, dear God, give me wings so I can fly away. Yeah, that whole thing of her wishing that she could have wings and fly away and get out of, like, say, this hellhole that she's in, you know, with her father. Eventually, she did get out of there. She was safe and sound, no longer living with her father, and this time living with her grandmother. And Jenny's grandmother being played by Faye Janines. I think I'm saying that right. But from time to time, Jenny would always come and, you know, visit Forrest at his house and, you know, have a little sleepover with him because she was scared, presumably, and according to Forrest, probably because of her grandmother's dog, and her grandmother's dog not being a very friendly dog. And up to when they would become teenagers and up to high school, they would still be good friends. And once again, geez, because it's obvious that it's the same bullies, yeah. And this time they're on a truck, and they just not leaving poor Forrest alone. And once again, Forrest running. And yeah, Jenny telling Forrest to run, Forrest, run. And of course, that's what Forrest does. And eventually, he would outrun the bullies in their truck. And at a certain point, and because he kept running, he wound up being in a football field. And the people at the football field, like the coaches and such, they were wondering who that was. And, you know, when they were told that it was Forrest Gump, well, a little later, because of his running, this got Forrest Gump into football. And, well, he was technically quite good at it, even though they know that he's stupid and such. They admit that he is a good runner. Even when he is, you know, runs off, you know, and not getting back on the football field doing what he does doing football, just, yeah. And to speed things up still, because, yeah, life going pretty well for Forrest when it came to playing football, and his friendship between Jenny, and how, at a certain point, he started to fall in love with Jenny. But did Jenny also fell in love with Forrest? That's the thing. And even when Forrest, he wanted to pay a visit to Jenny at a school that she went to, but, you know, this school that Jenny went to, Forrest, unfortunately, was not able to go to this school. But when he does so, yeah, when he goes to, you know, meet Jenny, and he's waiting on her, because presumably, yeah, she hasn't come back to the school that she's at. College, I should say. Sorry, college. He happens to see a car pull in, and noticing that, yeah, Jenny's in this car, and she's making out with this guy, but the guy's getting a little aggressive with Jenny, and Forrest stepping in to stop this, even punching the guy, and it ends kind of badly for Jenny and this guy she was, you know, dating, and yeah, but you know what, probably for the best, you know. And, you know, I'd like to comment on this and point this out, because I as well mentioned this to my mom, and she was like, what? Like, because I am too. The whole thing that people say that Jenny is labeled as a villain. Why? Even when I rewatched this, not once did it occur to me. Granted, I get it, okay? That probably, yeah, Jenny was kind of very harsh on Forrest, but I don't think really, like, in a way that you'd be thinking, just, I don't know, she had the most respect for Forrest. They were friends since childhood. The thing is, and throughout this movie, sadly, Jenny was making some bad/stupid decisions in her life, and not once did it occur to her that Forrest was the right man for her, and if she had stayed with Forrest all that time, you know, even what would come next for Forrest, then you know what? She wouldn't be in so much hellholes that I'm sure you get my point. And here's another way to put at it. She was clearly not thinking straight with her life. All the crazy crap that she was doing, and while what Forrest was doing, he was really succeeding in his life, but unlike Jenny. Just, I could go into so much more detail, but I'm sure you get what I'm saying, okay? Anyways, so, yeah, after Forrest calls, you know, Jenny's boyfriend, presumably, to run off and break up with her, just, yeah, and even, you know, Forrest, giving her a box of chocolates, well, you know, she seems okay now, and it's all good between them, and, having Forrest, stay with her for the night, where, you know, in her, room that she's in college, and, well, even when, she has a roommate, and presumably her roommate is already asleep. Well, the conversations that Forrest and Jenny have, and even when Jenny, mentions to Forrest about, destiny, and yeah, that whole thing of destiny, and, you know, what is Forrest's destiny, and that also goes for Jenny. She's wanting to be a folk singer. That's what she wants to do. And then, Jenny kind of gets a little physical with Forrest, like, have you ever been with a girl, Forrest? And, well, she takes off her bra and allows Forrest, like, grabbing his hand, and Forrest, like, I can understand his reaction, just, yeah, this is the first time for him, like, staring at what he's seeing, but when touching, just, dizzy, just, yeah, that's understandable, even, you know, even for Forrest. And, you know, Jenny assures Gump that it's okay, yeah. Maybe Forrest is probably not quite ready, because, yeah, it's understandable. And they just, like, start to cuddle and just, yeah, not really get physical, but still, you know, even, again, presumably, Jenny's college roommate, who may or may not be asleep, well, she isn't, and can hear all that's happening, she's, you know, they're behind her, and just the look on her face. But, yeah. Then, you know, more on Forrest, in football, and, yeah, again, it goes pretty well for him playing football, even when the football team that he's on, at one point, they get to go to the White House and meet with President John F. Kennedy. Yeah, John F. Kennedy. And also, to go ahead and mention this, the special effects for Forrest Gump, done by ILM, short for Industrial Light and Magic, they did pretty good at the visual effects that they're done with this, inserting Tom Hanks as Forrest Gump on screen with whomever it is, you know, famous figures, legends, like, you know, again, when it comes to Forrest meeting with President John F. Kennedy. And, you know, rewatching this, I feel as though that, well, at the time, it looked pretty good and impressive, but as of now, you can definitely tell because of the lip reading, like the lip sync and such, you know, making the presidents say different words of dialogue and such, and when they're interacting with Forrest Gump, because, yeah, Forrest talking about when it came to him and his fellow football team members going to the White House, and one thing that Forrest really got a kick out of was the free food, and even when there was free Dr. Peppers, and he must have drank in, I think, about 17 cans of Dr. Peppers, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, he drank all of them. And there was at one point when it came to the football team members meeting with Kennedy, shaking his hand, and when it comes to Forrest, we can see that, yeah, he's doing a little potty dance because he's really got to go to the bathroom. And when it comes to, you know, he shakes hands with Kennedy, and what he says to Kennedy is, I really gotta pee, and, well, this fella's gotta pee, and, yeah, well, at least Kennedy, took it well, and, yeah, because, thankfully, Forrest, he does get to go to the bathroom, and, he's good, so, yeah, but, yeah, a lucky man Forrest was, meeting Kennedy, not just Kennedy, but the other people that he meets, and as I mentioned, and the more I talk about them later on, but, yeah, and, yeah, again, Forrest doing really good at football, and even when he got a college degree. And at one point, Forrest is handed this flyer and, you know, offered to be a part of the United States Army. And that's what he does, yeah. Forrest entering into the United States Army. And, oh my gosh, because even when he gets on the bus, the other volunteers that will be a part of the Army and later on the Vietnam War, they're treating Forrest like crap too, not allowing him to sit on the bus except for one, and whom would become a good best friend of his, and that being Bubba Blue, being played by Mikatali Williamson, if I might have mispronounced his last name. Again, you know me sometimes. And some of the other Army, you know, volunteers, like Army Recruiter being played by Dawn Fisher, Army Bus Driver that Forrest interacts with, and the Army Bus Driver, you know, treating him like a drill, like he speaks to him like a drill sergeant. That was Kenneth Bevington, yeah. Oh, and there he is, because Kennedy, the voice of President Kennedy in Forrest Gump was Jed Gillian, if I'm getting his last name right. Yeah, I wanted to mention him, and there he is. And some of the other bus recruits, there was Michael Flannery, and there was Gary Robinson, who played another bus recruit, yeah. And, well, and yeah, when it comes to them, you know, on campus, and the things they've got to learn, like, you know, build and put the pieces together of their rifle, and then, you know, taking it apart, yeah, and the drill sergeant, whom they come face-to-face with, being played by Afimo Omaliami, if I'm even saying his last name right, and Forrest even, what he has to say about, you know, the drill sergeant, and even pointing out that, you know, every time the drill sergeant finishes a sentence, we know the thing, sir, yes, sir, and it's this, in Forrest Gump, it's, yes, drill sergeant, sir, yeah. And yeah, it doesn't take too long for there to be a friendship growing between Bubba and Forrest, and most notably, Bubba at times going on talking about shrimps. And yeah, because even when Forrest, at one point later on, making a promise to his new good best friend Bubba that, you know, they would have their own shrimp boat and collecting shrimp and such. And, yeah. And again, life for Forrest, and when it comes to being a part of the United States Army, not bad. Not bad for Forrest. He seems to be pretty good at it. Even when he discovers that his friend Jenny, well, she got herself kicked out of college, I want to say, yeah. And Forrest discovered this, like, when someone handed him a catalog, Playboy and such, and just so happens that Jenny is on that magazine, and this upsets Forrest, understandable, and just so happens that he took a bus to see Jenny perform, and she technically did become a folk singer, but how she becomes a folk singer, just, yeah, she basically is, like, kind of like stripping and such, not really, just, yeah, like, when Forrest sees her performing, well, because, yeah, she has no bra. She does have panties, but no bra, and her boobs being covered by a guitar. She's trying to sing, but the guys up front, they just want some tits and so on, yeah. And Forrest is not liking this, and he helps out Jenny by carrying her, getting up on stage and carrying her out of there, but Jenny, she gets upset towards Forrest, and, yeah. Again, if only Jenny had not made bad choices in her life, she would know that she rightfully so belongs with Forrest. Yeah, because, and, you know, despite the fact what Jenny does, Forrest, he still cares and loves for her. Yeah, like, he doesn't seem to let that bother him that, yeah, Jenny not staying by Forrest's side, and even, like, yeah, when they don't get together officially until very later on, and her just still running away and so on. Yeah, unfortunate. But, yeah, and to speed things up still, because, yeah, Forrest's still in the Army, and when it comes to the Vietnam War, him and Bubba now in action, and even when they come face-to-face with someone else who would be another big part in Forrest's life, and another friend, technically, Lieutenant Dan Taylor, being played by Gary Sinise, if I'm saying his last name right. You know who I'm talking about. And, well, the fact that he and Tom would work a couple of other times, like most notably Apollo 13. Yeah, so, and he's a good actor, great actor, definitely. And what Gary brought to Lieutenant Dan in Forrest Gump, just amazing, yeah, because he's quite a handful. He definitely is. His personality and how he interacts with his fellow, you know, Army. And, yeah, even when the war happens, and with the platoon that, yeah, alongside with Lieutenant Dan, they're in action, and, just, yeah. And still, to speed things up, because, yeah, when they're at war, and, yeah, because the guns going off, and, explosions, and even when, at a certain point, Lieutenant Dan and most of the other soldiers, they are badly wounded, and some of them not really surviving. Lieutenant Dan, thankfully, did survive, and, Forrest, you know, it's just Forrest, because he wasn't going to let Lieutenant Dan die, and Lieutenant Dan, he didn't want to be rescued by Forrest, especially leaving his fellow Army troops behind, the platoon and such, and even when Forrest, he goes back to save his friend Bubba, and unfortunately, poor Bubba, he didn't make it, sadly. And even though, yeah, sadly, Bubba died, Forrest still kept that promise from Bubba that, you know, they would get a boat for shrimp hunting, and that's what would happen later on. And unfortunately for Forrest, he did get wounded. He got wounded on the buttocks, especially like a certain point later on with the whole thing of him being wounded by the buttocks. Yeah, till I mention that. Yeah, and Lieutenant Dan, he's very upset and just goes into a deep depression with what the heck had happened to him. Lieutenant Dan lost both his legs, literally, and the visual effects on Lieutenant Dan with no legs and with Gary, really good, just really good. And if you've seen the behind the scenes, oh yeah, that was pretty awesome. Yeah. Eventually, Lieutenant Dan was sent home. Yeah, he can no longer serve in the United States Army with his condition of no longer having legs. And Forrest, well, you know, still staying with the United States Army. And when at a certain point, he gets involved and starts to become really good at playing ping pong. And yeah, he becomes well known with his skills and playing ping pong in the United States Army, and whom he goes against, you know, playing ping pong, someone from North Korea and such, you know. And even, like, other presidents that he would meet, and, you know, the more time he spends, you know, serving for the Army, like, you know, because he would meet with, say, Lyndon B. Johnson, and Lyndon B. Johnson, you know, knowing about what happened to Forrest and where he got wounded and such, and, well, Forrest telling him that, you know, he got wounded, you know, in the buttocks, and, well, even showing Lyndon B. Johnson his wounded buttocks, and, well, Lyndon B. Johnson, he he took it okay, just, very awkward, especially for Forrest's mother, who's there in the audience watching her son meet with Lyndon B. Johnson. And Lyndon B. Johnson, the voice of Lyndon B. Johnson in Forrest Gump, that was, and if he's uncredited, I probably, yeah. Okay, no, here he is. He's not uncredited. And again, IMDb sometimes crediting them so randomly. You know this, yeah. President Johnson being voiced by John William Galt. I think, yeah, I'm saying the last name right. Yeah. I gotta say, because, those that provided the voices of the presidents and any other legendary figure that Forrest meets, they did pretty good impressions on those people. So, yeah. Then at one point, Forrest finds himself, in Washington still, and, getting to make a speech, because with these group of people, because, America and so on, and, Forrest, trying to make a speech, and unfortunately, someone from the army, unplugs the cords, and, yeah, thankfully, those group of people, they tell that guy to piss off, and they try to plug them back in as quick as they can so everybody can hear Forrest's speech about Vietnam, but unfortunately they didn't. But obviously those that were right up next to Forrest by the microphones, they obviously heard and listened to what he had to say about Vietnam, and yeah. And when asked who he is, his name, and him saying Forrest Gump, and yeah, Forrest Gump, and yeah, Gump, they shout Gump. Well, this gets the attention of someone who knows that name and just runs to Forrest shouting his name, that being Jenny, says Forrest in the microphones. And yeah, Jenny and Forrest, they're once again reunited. And we can see that as of now, Jenny, she's now gone into the hippie mood, being a hipster and so on. Things seem to be going pretty well for Forrest and Jenny. But that is until they find themselves, and with Jenny's fellow hipsters, at the Black Panther Party. And the Black Panther Party basically, and the description of it, because, yeah, to protect our black leaders from racial onslaught from the pig who is brutalizing our people. Yeah, if you know, and, what's established in Forrest Gump, and, yeah. I mean, Forrest, he's not doing anything intentionally, and, he obviously respects those at the Black Panther Party, not wanting to cause any trouble, of course, but that is until someone who's technically dating Jenny gets into a little bit of an argument with Jenny, even slapping her, and this rages Forrest. Oh yeah. You don't want to mess with someone like Forrest, especially if it's someone that slaps his girl, Jenny. Oh, yeah. He lets the guy, let him have it, and I'd say rightfully so, And even Forrest, he should not be hitting you, Jenny, and yeah, he makes a good point. But even later, that guy, he says that he's sorry and he would never hurt her. Bull crap, you already did so, you idiot, but yeah. And again, he didn't want to cause any trouble at the Black Panthers party, and, he apologizes and such, and yeah. Once again, Jenny a bit unhappy with Forrest, but nothing really intentional, everything's settled down, and once again, Jenny leaving Forrest. Just, yeah, again, this girl not learning until the very end. Sadly, it's one of those things, yeah. But yeah, after that, even Forrest, he offered and, pretty much gave Jenny his Medal of Honor. Pat gave it to Jenny, yeah, which was very sweet of him, but still, So, yeah, sadly, once again, Jenny leaving Forrest, but, yeah, what happens to Jenny next? And, I didn't talk about Jenny that much because, Robin Wright, good old Robin Wright, and this is especially, right after she was probably best known at the time when, what made her go big was obviously The Princess Bride, and what would come next for her, and Forrest Gump being one of them. Oh, yeah. Her performance as Jenny is pretty good. And again, say what you will about Jenny, but how I'm putting at it and how I have throughout this review, come on, bear with me. And one of Jenny's dates, being played by Mark Matheson. Yeah, I think I said that right. But yeah, the more that happens with Forrest, and still out there in public, and, you know, even when he's still in the United States Army and still playing ping pong, still good at it, and even when, you know, other familiar faces that he would meet, like, I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, like, he did have an encounter, yeah, with Nixon, because, yeah, we get Nixon in this movie, and, yeah, he did, and, well, even going on Dick Cavett's show, and John Lennon happens to be there on Dick Cavett's show with Forrest Gump, and John Lennon being voiced by Joe Stefanelli, if I'm saying the last name right. A pretty good voice impression of John Lennon, and John Lennon asking Forrest these questions about Vietnam and ping pong and so on. Yeah. And according to Forrest, because, yeah, talking about, you know, what happened to John Lennon afterwards, you know, that John Lennon, you know, was at one point encountered some fans and was signing autographs, and for no reason whatsoever, someone shot John, you know, in the back and such, and as we all know, yeah, John Lennon sadly getting murdered. And Dick Cavett appearing as himself. That was really cool. And to name some of the other cast members, like, there was Man in Vietnam War Bug, being played by Paul Rakowski, if I'm saying that right, and Chinese ping pong player being played by Valentine, okay? And there was also a veteran at War Rally being played by Jay Ross, Isabel being played by Isabel Rose, Hillary being played by Hillary Chaplin, and there was also Abby Hoffman being played by Richard D. Alessandro. Yeah, I think I'm saying that right. Policeman at War Rally being played by Dick Stillwell. Yeah. Two of the Black Panthers being played by Kevin Davis and Michael Chase. And, yeah, Wesley being played by Jeffrey Blake. Hippie at Commune being played by Tim Perry. And two Hollywood Boulevard girlfriends, Vanessa Roth and Emily Carey. They played them. And also Carla being played by Tiffany Salarino. Yeah. And Lenore being played by Marla Chartisa, however the last name's pronounced. Again, you know me sometimes, but anyways. Then at one point, and this was right after we saw Forrest on Dick Cavett's show, he once again encountered and reunited with, and how he still prefers to him as Lieutenant Dan. And by this point, Lieutenant Dan, he's in a wheelchair, and because, yeah, he lost both of his legs, and he's a total mess. He had not shaved in God knows how long, and he is just letting Forrest have it, jealous of what Forrest has been doing. Even, like, mentioning of the honored medal and such, you know, which he gave to Jenny and such. But despite all that, Forrest, he still considered Lieutenant Dan a friend and such, you know. And even helping out Lieutenant Dan, helping him get back to where he's living in New York, and staying with Lieutenant Dan for a while. And even when it comes to, say, Christmas and New Year's, and yeah. And even when, these two girls, I know I'd mentioned them already, who, you know Lieutenant Dan, and they're kind of hooked up with him and such. And even, you know, starting to hook up with Forrest too. Forrest being dragged into this too. What's going on with Jenny? Because when we would come back to Jenny, a little bit of a montage of what she's been doing and with her fellow hipsters. But also, when it came to, say, like, yeah, her taking drugs, cocaine, just, what are you doing, Jenny? Please, don't do this. You belong with Forrest. Like, yeah, like, God, just, again, she never learned until the very end, sadly. Yeah. And when everything was looking good for her. Yeah. But anyways, and well, New Year's hitting, and the time and setting of Up to Win, yeah, Forrest spends some time with Lieutenant Dan. It's New Year's and the year 1972, yeah. And, well, back at Lieutenant Dan's place, there's a bit of a hookup and such. Lieutenant Dan with one of the girls, and the other one trying to hook up with Forrest, but he's not interested, and golly, the two girls, like, they start to be out of nowhere rude to Forrest, but good on Dan's part. He sticks up for his friend Forrest, telling them not to call him stupid and kicking them out. Rightfully so, yeah. And things start to settle down, technically, but still, Lieutenant Dan still being quite of a mess, and yeah. And later on, Forrest, he went off to where his late friend Bubba lived, and still keeping that promise on getting a fishing boat for shrimp, and with how much money he spent acquiring this boat. And another famous line/quote that he would say sometimes, you know, and whenever the word stupid is mentioned, stupid is as stupid does, sir. Yeah, it's true. Yeah, think about it. So yeah, again, Forrest acquiring this boat and his attempt on trying to catch some shrimp, doesn't go too well a couple of times. And also, relatives of Bubba, his grandmother, yeah, because, like, you know, from his grandmother to his mother, like, yeah. Bubba's mother being played by Marlena Smalls, yeah, and Bubba's great-grandmother being played by Kitty K. Green. Also, can't forget to mention that before he would acquire a boat and, you know, for shrimp hunting, he was no longer a part of the United States Army. His services were no longer required, and even when it came to playing ping pong, not for the United States Army, which, yeah, I mean, you know, it was fun while it lasted for Forrest being part of the United States Army. Tough at times, but still, you know, you get my point. Well, even at a certain point, and still to speed things up, well, Forrest, at one point on his boat, he comes face to face and encounters Lieutenant Dan. He showed up, and even when, you know, he told Forrest early on that if he would ever get a shrimp boat, then he would, you know, work alongside with Forrest. And, you know, and because, unfortunately, Bubba tragically died, well, that would make Forrest the captain of the boat, and, well, Lieutenant Dan being, you know, lieutenant and so on of the boat, and thus, that's what happens. And Forrest, like, he jumped out of the boat and making his way to the dock to, you know, greet Lieutenant Dan, not caring that, yeah, his boat was still out on the ocean, and even when it crashed on another dock, just, yeah. But, of course, the boat turned out fine. And, yeah, them working together, trying to get shrimps, but, yeah, still, no luck trying to get shrimps. And even when at one point, there's a big storm that comes in, and at times, the mentioning of God, and even when Lieutenant Dan was talking about, you know, if he would, you know, meet with Jesus and, you know, go to the kingdom of heaven and such, and even when Forrest told Lieutenant Dan that, I'm gonna go to heaven, yeah. And, well, because when a storm approaches and, you know, Lieutenant Dan, like, you know, like, saying that that's God, like, there's God and such, and with the storm, and, like, shouting at God, and, you know, you son of a bitch, I'm not afraid, and so on with what Lieutenant Dan says. But Forrest, I mean, he's terrified of the storm, doing whatever it takes to keep the boat steady and such out in the rough waters, especially because, yeah, they're in the middle of a storm. But Lieutenant Dan, according to Forrest, yeah, he's mad. He doesn't care if he gets killed in the storm. Just laughing like crazy and having the time of his life, basically. And eventually, what would happen next is, like, the shrimp company, and the boats and such, you know, in the aftermath of the storm, did some pretty heavy damage. However, according to the news and the news anchor, one of the shrimp boats did survive. And that, of course, being, and it's obvious, the one that Forrest and Lieutenant Dan are on. Yeah. And eventually, even after that, they, this time, managed to get a whole buttload of shrimps. Yeah, a very quick montage of them getting shrimp. And even, like, the time that they spent where Bubba lived and grew up at, well, even Forrest being a part of the church, going there every Sunday, Dan would be there, and just, yeah. So, yeah, everything going pretty well for Forrest and Lieutenant Dan, and with the boat and getting shrimps. But then at one point, the radio calling up, you know, on their boat that there's a message for Captain Forrest. And basically, the message is that Forrest's mother is sick. And doesn't take too long, not 1 second, when Forrest, he jumps out of the boat and swims and, well, running back to, you know, Alabama to check up and, you know, see his mother as, yeah, she's currently sick. Yeah, and, well, the sequence with Forrest and, his mama, the time that they spent, and before she's soon to die, she sadly has cancer, and Forrest even asking his mama, "Why you dying, mama? It's just my time." And another mentioning of Forrest's destiny, and, you know, sadly, his mama telling him that it's gonna be up to him now, you know, with his destiny and such, and yeah. Sadly, a little later on, and on a Saturday or Tuesday, I have to go back and look, but yeah, according to Forrest, yeah, she did, you know, die, and presumably peacefully and such, you know, peacefully died, and, yeah. And even after Forrest's mama died, Forrest, he still lived in that house ever since, you know, he was a boy. Yep. And pretty much, yeah, because him living by himself, but there are a few couple of people that, you know, still care at that house and such, you know, you've seen the movie, you know. And yeah, the time that Forrest spends back in Alabama, and even, like, say, when he does this for free, like, you know, mowing the grass at a football field, and a bunch of other stuff that he does, just, yeah. Also, a little early on, because when he came back, and this was after, you know, he was no longer, his services were no longer required in the United States Army. He came back home. Well, you know, and when his mama, still alive, welcoming her son home, everybody there greeting him, and not to mention, because he went big time with ping pong. Well, a lot of merchandise and that are inside of the house that has Forrest's face on it, even a specific ping pong on 2 different sides, like one with his face and one of his competitors. God, that was funny. Also, can't forget to mention this as well. Whenever we would cut back to Forrest telling his story to anybody who would sit on the park bench waiting for the bus, yeah. And how some of them, they are intrigued and they like the story that Forrest is telling. And even when it comes up to one of the last people to listen to his story, this older woman, and yeah, being very intrigued and being very caring with the story that he talks about. Even when it came up to his mother's passing, even the lady couldn't help but, you know, whip a few tears. Yeah, so very sweet of her. Yeah, and again, and to speed things up still, because, yeah, the time that Forrest spent mostly being alone, still living in the house, and up until when, at one point, and surprisingly enough, Jenny showed up. Yeah, she finally came back to Forrest. And, yeah, Forrest, more than happy to see that she came back. And also, yeah, all the people that, you know, being very important in his life, from Bubba, his mother, Lieutenant Dan, but most of all, Jenny. He could never help but always think of Jenny. And also, early on, and when he was still serving in the Vietnam War, he was writing letters to Jenny. But at a certain point, when maybe it seemed like she might have written back to Forrest, like, yeah, there's a lot of letters that are, you know, tied up. No. All of the letters that he wrote to her were sent back to him. Jeez. But again, up to this point when, yeah, Jenny did come back, she was doing the right thing this time. Yep, she's coming back to live with Forrest, and, well, according to Forrest, she presumably had nowhere else to go. And, yeah, and rightfully so, coming to Forrest. And most of the time, her sleeping, like, this was the first time in a long time that she had gotten any good sleep, and to Forrest, they were like peas and carrots again. The time that they spend, like the old days when they were kids, sitting in this specific tree that they favored, even more stuff that they teach one another, like most notably Jenny teaching Forrest how to dance. And even at one point, Jenny surprising Forrest with a special gift, a pair of shoes, and those shoes that we would see Forrest wearing at the start of this movie on that park bench. Those, yeah. And even when, like, New Year's comes up, yeah, because presumably, yeah, because that's what it is, and it's on the TV. And at one point, and on that same evening, after, like, turning the TV off, and as she's about to make her way upstairs, Forrest asks Jenny, "Will you marry me?" "I'd make a good husband, Jenny." And she acknowledges, like, you know, she says that, you know, he would make a good husband. And then Forrest, like, I think, yeah, he can sense the fact and then says to Jenny, "But you won't marry me, and you don't love me back," and so on. And, yeah, and then Forrest then at one point, before walking outside of the front door, Forrest telling Jenny that, "I may not be smart, but I know what love is." And yeah, again, him walking out on the front patio, and the way he's got his arms, like, on the back of him, like, you know, very interesting. Like, who'd ever, I'm sure there'd be somebody out there that would do that with their arms, like what Forrest does, you know. And later that evening, a stormy night, Forrest is in bed by himself in his old room. Well, Jenny, emerging from the patio window to his room, and, what, she just went, I presume, yeah, she went from one bedroom to the next, coming in and telling Forrest that she really does love him. She finally gives in, and yeah, and that's when they start to, you know, get physical and such, you know. But then, the next day, she leaves again. But this time, okay, she does say, even the taxi driver, does ask Jenny, like, "Why are you running away? Like, where are you running to?" And her saying that she's not really running away. Okay, and at least the next time we would see her, she actually is doing pretty good, but until I mention that. And yeah, Forrest, when he does wake up to see that Jenny is nowhere in sight in the house, and can see that, yeah, the Medal of Honor that he was given sitting in the room, in the house, and yeah, he of course knows that, yeah, Jenny has once again left, and a little bit of quiet where, yeah, Forrest is sitting by himself. Then at one point, out of nowhere, he puts on his red ball cap and he starts to run. Yeah, just simply running. No, for no particular reason, just running. And for 3 years, he runs. Yeah, that whole sequence where he is running from one ocean to the next, going to different countries and so on. And throughout those 3 years, the beard that he would grow, and some people that he would meet, where apparently in Forrest Gump, he would help inspire those, do these very popular products and such, like helping this guy create this tagline, you know, "shit happens." Because, like, you know, when Forrest accidentally stepped in some dog shit, and, you know, it happens, and so on. And even when he helped this one guy make this popular t-shirt and such with a yellow smiley face, that whole thing. Because, yeah, Forrest getting mud on him and, you know, cleaning him off with a yellow shirt, and somehow he made that iconic smiley face. Yeah. And even when Forrest then started getting company, those who know who Forrest is and look up to him, they start to tag along with Forrest on this long journey running. And even when, you know, this gets out on the news of him running, and they're wondering, why is he doing this? Is he doing this for a specific reason, like for a foundation or something? But none of that, because all that Forrest says is, I just felt like running, and nothing else. Just that. And even Jenny noticing this, because where we would see her next, this time she technically is doing good. She's working at a cafe. She's a waitress. So at least, yeah, she's doing better with where she's at right now. And her seeing this on the TV that Forrest is running, and even she's impressed. Yeah, even some of the folks in Alabama noticing this, and again, those elderly gentlemen, the comments that they at times made about Forrest, yeah. Up until at one point, and presumably, yeah, I think where, like, say, the Grand Canyon is, or something, that location, you know, at a certain point, Forrest, he stopped. And when he turned around and facing all of those people that tagged along with him, one guy saying that, you know, he's about to say something, and what Forrest says is, I'm really tired. I think I'm gonna go home now. And, yeah. It now hit him after those 3 years of running that, you know what, he was now done. Yeah, his running days were over, and yeah, at a certain point, that's when he finally decided to stop. And those poor people, well, they did this to themselves. They were willingly, you know, tagged along and kept Forrest company. They did that to themselves, willingly and such. And even one of them were saying, what do we do now? Because, yeah, where they're at, and just, well, I don't know, catch a plane, catch a bus, I don't know. And, well, back at home, Forrest, yeah, because by that point he had shaved and so on, you know, all freshened up. Like, he looked the same the day when he started doing that long run. At one point, he received a letter from Jenny asking him to come visit her in Savannah, and that's where all that time that Forrest was telling his story to anybody sitting on that park bench, it's now over, and we're now up to where he's currently at now. At that park bench, waiting for a bus to go to where Jenny is living. However, when he tells the lady, you know, where he's supposed to meet Jenny, according to her, it's like 5 or 6 blocks where he's at right now on the park bench. So he doesn't need to take a bus. He can just run there. And that's what he does. And even nice on the lady, you know, saying that, I hope all works out good, you know, how she says it. And she was right. Everything does turn out pretty good for Forrest and Jenny. Jenny is more than happy to see Forrest again. And, well, life for Jenny is going pretty well. The position that she's doing, you know, the job and such, just, yeah. Also, to mention some of the, like, yeah, can't forget to mention Nixon, because I didn't mention who voices Nixon. I'm just saying, because, yeah, the voice of Nixon was voiced by the late legendary voice actor Joe Alasky, best known for voicing some of the Tiny Toons characters, and most notably, some of the Looney Tunes characters from Bugs, Daffy, Marvin, Sylvester. We know who Joe Lasky is. A great voice actor. Yeah, and you know what? He did a pretty good spot-on impression of Nixon. Yeah. So, yeah. So back to what I was saying, because again, Forrest, you know, reuniting with Jenny, and even when Forrest meets Jenny's son, and, well, Forrest, you know, wondering about, you know, what her son is like, and, you know, and whom the father is to Jenny's son. And can't forget to mention that young Haley Joe Osment plays Jenny's son. And, yeah, the name of her son is Forrest Jr. And Forrest, he doesn't immediately understand and realize, and when asking Jenny, he's got a daddy named Forrest, too. And when she tells Forrest that he is his father, and how shocking Forrest is, and Jenny assuring Forrest that he didn't do anything wrong, and it's okay, and yeah. I guess presumably, because I guess the night that they made love, I guess that's when she would slowly but surely become pregnant. I guess, I don't know, but, you know. And Forrest being very touched by this. And even when Jenny tells him that he's a very smart kid and being very smart at the school he goes to, couldn't be a more proud dad than ever, you know, Forrest. And Forrest wanting to interact with his son some more, and yeah, walking up to his son and asking him, "What are you watching, Bert and Ernie?" And then watching Ernie and Bert Sesame Street together. And I don't know why I never knew this until now, because when I rewatched this, both of them at the same time, Forrest Gump and his son, Forrest Jr., like father and son, they do a head tilt watching Sesame Street, like father and son, yeah. And then a little later, because, yeah, the time that Forrest spends with, you know, Jenny and his son, well, Jenny breaks the news to Forrest that she's sick, and Forrest wondering if it's like a cold or something. But no, Jenny has a virus, and according to her still, some more, that, well, the doctors can't figure out the problem with this virus, and there's really nothing that they can do. And, you know, at a certain point, when the time comes, she will pretty much die, and yeah. And that's when Jenny, she asks Forrest to marry her. Now she does, by this point. And, you know, when it seemed like everything was going so great for Jenny, now that she has a son, her life is doing really good. And even when Forrest is now back in it, still, sadly, all that time that happened with her, unsafe sex, the drugs, alcohol, cocaine's, oh, very sad. It really is. Stay away from that stuff, people. Come on. Yeah. Anyways, so yeah, eventually they do get married back at the Gump's house, and everybody that attends to it, even, surprisingly, Lieutenant Dan, he showed up, and he's much better than ever. Like, he's become become a completely different man. You know, he cleaned up, he's shaved, he got special legs, you know, made, you know, for that, the type of legs that he has, according to him, made specifically from, say, you know, when it comes to the astronauts, outer space and such, you know, and Forrest Gump, you know, saying, "You got new legs." Magic legs, technically. And, well, even Lieutenant Dan, still being referred to as Lieutenant Dan, he found love. He now has a fiancé. And for the first time ever, Lieutenant Dan meeting Jenny. Yeah. And, oh yeah, and even Lieutenant Dan's fiancé, and that's how she's credited, being played by Teresa Denton. Yeah, an Asian woman. And, yeah, nice to see that Lieutenant Dan, he's gotten much better. And, you know, despite the fact that Forrest left Lieutenant Dan there in the shrimp boat and such, but obviously, yeah, again, Lieutenant Dan, he did much better then. And, yeah, again, he's got special kind of legs and found love, and yeah, and nice to see that he came along attending to the wedding. And also, the minister marrying Forrest and Jenny, yeah, him, being played by Lonnie Hamilton, yeah. Yeah. So, eventually, yeah, they do finally get married, and the time that they still spent with one another up until, sadly, when it now hits Jenny that, yeah, she starts to become sick, and eventually, she does, sadly, pass away. And, yeah, Forrest talking with Jenny at her gravesite and telling her that, you know, their son, is doing really good, learning how to read, and even, like, say, playing ping pong, them going fishing, and even Forrest tells Jenny that he had her childhood home where she used to live with her alcoholic, abusive father, have it be bulldozed. And yeah, there was one moment very early on when Jenny came back to Forrest and they went for a little walk. Jenny, most of the time, was very quiet. Forrest did most of the talking to her about his times, you know, in the Vietnam War, you know, shrimps and so on. And when up until they came face to face at the old house that she lived in and starting to throw her shoes and rocks, you know, how could you do these things to me? Just letting out her anger towards the house that once was her father's. And it's understandable. And very sweet of Forrest to have it be bulldozed, have it be completely demolished, the memories of that house be gone forever. Just, yeah. Yeah. You know, just how very emotional it is. And yeah, sadly, Forrest losing the love of his life. But I think it's obvious, rest assured, she's in a much better place. And especially watching over her beloved Forrest and her child. Yeah. And also, Forrest leaving a note for Jenny that, yeah, I think, yeah, Forrest Jr. wrote. Just, yeah, leaving the note right there at the gravesite. Yeah, very sweet of him. And even, like, say, when he walks off, a flock of birds fly. And I'm pretty sure that is a definite sign that, yeah, Jenny praying for having wings and flying away and such. Yeah, so. And the final scene where Forrest Jr. is making his way to school. And, well, Forrest, right before Forrest Jr. gets on the bus, gotta slow down. Forrest telling his son that, you know, I love you very much. And he says back to him, I love you too, Daddy. And the bus driver, still the same bus driver, same person apparently. Yeah. And still a nice bus driver, the interaction that she has with Forrest Jr. And, well, the movie ending off where, like how it started in this movie, the white feather, yeah, because it was flying and it landed on the ground right next to Forrest. This time, being right next to Forrest, it flies into the sky, and yeah. And the movie ends off right there, and when the feather hits the camera, just, oh, what a great way to end it off right there, without a doubt. Forrest Gump. It's without a doubt a movie masterpiece, one of Robert Zemeckis' top best movies that he has directed. The story, the characters, the music and score by the one and only Alan Silvestri, the funny and heart-hitting emotional moments, the visual effects, the specific moments and sequences that happen in this movie, the tragic losses in Forrest's life, what he does from, you know, playing ping pong, the Vietnam War, football, shrimps, you know, his relationship with Jenny and so on, and when he would become a dad, and the story that he tells to anybody who is at the park bench, you know, just from beginning to end, everything about 1994's Forrest Gump, it's a masterpiece. What more do I have to say? And I'm giving Forrest Gump, what the heck, 10 out of 10 stars. Obviously, yeah, 10 out of 10 stars for Forrest Gump. And what about you guys? What did you think of Forrest Gump itself? Is it one of your top favorite Zemeckis films? One of your top favorite movies? And, you know, favorite movies from the 90s? What are some of your favorite moments from the movie with the characters, the sequences, specific moments that happen in the film? Any of you that, you know, got tear-jerky and such, you know, with what happens in this movie? Got some laughs? Because, yeah, the movie delivering some pretty good funny moments, especially from Forrest. You know, just, and you know, and also, like, how do you feel on, say, the character of Jenny and how I've tried to put at it? And if any of you, like, would also feel the same way as, like, you know, one or two other people that I know of that, you know, feeling that the movie is dated and such. I mean, I don't know. Again, come on. The history and this being a masterpiece of a movie, you get my point. And as I said earlier, just, yeah. Yeah, what more do I have to say? Overall, what do you think of Forrest Gump itself, and with what I've had to say, my review, and yeah, what did you think of my review? Leave comments and give this review video a like, as always. And so, with all that being said, thank you very much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed my review of Forrest Gump. More review videos are coming your way. They're going to be awesome. Keep looking forward. And I will see you guys in the next video / review. And, well, Robert Zemeckis Movie Week has just begun. Stay tuned later tonight, because what I will be reviewing next, well, to best describe it, and you're gonna figure it out anyways, you're gonna know and such, when I say that Zemeckis attempting to do a film in the style of an Alfred Hitchcock film, and the film starring two well-known talented people, Michelle Pfeiffer and Harrison Ford. Yeah, you know. Again, stay tuned for that. Take care, and peace out. Life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're gonna get.